Public service announcement. We are literally in a cultural literacy crisis, okay? Forget the education crisis right now. Forget the personality epidemic. Forget all that, okay? We need to focus because we are in a cultural literacy crisis, and I think we need to talk about it. And trust me, you guys are in for an absolute treat today. Okay? If you've been on the internet this week, or if you've been on the internet period, you've probably heard the saying, we're losing recipes, okay? And we are. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you don't even know what that means, respectfully, honestly, truly, I'm sorry, but you're part of the problem. But don't worry, you don't have to be your chronically online bestie, me. I'm here to explain it to you, but not too much. You got to be quiet on the creek. Because as funny as that phrase is, as funny as we use that in the comments to say, damn, we are losing recipes, is not funny. There's nothing funny about it, because we're talking about something much bigger, much grander than just literal recipes. Here's the thing, as I, dissect and slice and dice and bring the nuance, context, and history into what that saying actually means, it really was getting to me. We're really talking about inheritance. We're really talking about culture. We're talking about things getting genuinely passed on. And what happens when nobody is passing on the recipes? Nobody's passing on the culture. Nobody's passing on inheritance. What do we do then? How is the culture going to survive? Someone's got to teach it. Someone's got to practice it, because we can't just let things disappear. Not on my watch.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
And while, of course, we're talking about more than just recipes, I think that's a great place to start. When you eat, pray, love, and mind your business, that eating part is very crucial. It's very critical. I love to make food. I love to eat food. I love to go get food. Okay, period. So I think starting with the recipes in this whole recipe equation is a perfect place to start. I saw this video on TikTok the other day.
So a ticking time bomb that I feel like not a lot of people know about is the fact that most of your favorite local Chinese restaurants that are being owned by like Chinese immigrants are probably not going to be around within the next 10 to 15 years. And this is because, for context, my parents own a Chinese restaurant, and basically all of our friends and family in our like community also own their own Chinese restaurants. So, what I know is happening is that a lot of these people who came to America, a couple decades ago, opened up their Chinese restaurants. They're getting to the age now where they are trying to figure out how to retire and how to essentially like what to do with the business. And so one of the options obviously is to sell it to someone else who wants to continue operating the restaurant, as it currently is. And basically, from what my parents have told me, the prices that these businesses, like these Chinese restaurants, are going for on these like Chinese communities forums where people are like listing their restaurants, these restaurants are being sold for dirt cheap, because you are not getting the same influx of people coming into the US as like first-gen immigrants who wants to own and operate Chinese restaurants. This is an incredibly labor-intensive line of work, and these owners, like, you could say, oh, like, why don't they just pass it down to their kids? Most of the Chinese people that I know whose family own restaurants, their kids, my friends whose parents own restaurants, it was not even a question whether or not they wanted to like take on the family business, right? Like, the people who own and operate these restaurants know how extremely labor intensive and difficult it is to do this line of work. And that's because so much of the labor that goes into making and preparing your food is done by hand. It is not automated. Like, we, at least in my family's restaurant, we make every single dumpling by hand. And like the filling that goes into these dumplings, we make that by hand too. Like, my parents literally like grind up the pork. They hand chop the scallions, like hand measure all of like the sauces and everything. Like, it is so labor intensive to own and operate a Chinese restaurant. So like, of course they don't want me to go into this line of work. Like, so realistically, what is going to happen to these Chinese restaurants is that they, either just close up shop, and the owners are just like, okay, like, sorry, we're not doing this anymore, can't find any buyers. Or, if you do find buyers, like, who knows who these buyers are going to be, whether or not they're going to be able to run the restaurant with the same level of care as, was previously able to be managed by these original owners. Or realistically, what's going to happen is that private equity is going to come in, buy up these restaurants, because the prices for them are like dirt cheap right now, and they're going to cut costs wherever they can, cut labor wherever they can, which means the quality of your food is no longer, like, it's just not going to stay the same. So all this is to say, please go support your local Chinese restaurant, like your local mom and pop restaurant. Tell your friends, tell your family, like these businesses they're not going to exist in the same way in the next 10 to 15 years. So.
And this struck this whole conversation up for me, okay? It struck this whole conversation up. See, we're too busy standing in line for our iced lavender, matcha mocha, mochi milk latte, and our local Chinese spot is closing down. Where am I going to get my chicken and broccoli? Where am I going to get my egg rolls? Where am I going to get my General Tso's chicken? Okay, we're not focused on the right things, okay? We're waiting in line for some, overpriced boop to the bop kind of, grocery store, but your local Chinese food spot that has held you and your family down for years is about to close. So what's up with that? What can we do about that? And why is it important? This is a perfect example about how different communities are literally losing not just businesses in the physical sense, but losing culture, losing heritage, losing ethnic ties in the community. What's interesting to me is, of course, Chinese food has become a staple in not only American, but other cultures' food in their cuisine. It's like everywhere in the burbs, everywhere in the city, you have a Chinese food spot that you and your family frequent or have become some kind of, staple in your chill nights where you don't feel like cooking. So you order Chinese food. Hits the spot every time, it delivers. It's consistent. But we're finding more and more these cultural staples that you sometimes don't even realize are cultural staples in your life aren't able to pass all of this down. Now, if we break this down just a little bit more, truly it's because the shift from hands-on physical labor, more blue-collar work, to more corporate and technology-driven fields has completely changed the labor market, and not only just the labor market, but culture as a whole. We're rapidly seeing the benefits of that, but we're also slowly seeing the cultural seep and shift that's happening because of it. Because of this promise of scalable wealth, more remote flexibility, more flexibility and freedom with your time, something that, me being young, hot, wild, and free, and all the things, we value our freedom more than different generations. We have completely shifted the cultural lexicon without even realizing it. Our local Chinese spot will no longer exist in probably 10, 15, 20 years because all of us work at a big four consulting company. All of us work in tech and, are a CRNA. So while many younger professionals are charting our own wonderful, robust paths in our new career fields, this leaves us wondering not just about our local Chinese food spot and the families who run it, but also the different cultural pieces and institutions that are slowly eroding away from us because of these shifts. Especially because the cultural literacy is going down, down, down. A lot of what we fail to realize is that culture is really built in the most ordinary, regular moments. Online, we see the boom, boom, pow. We already talked about the marketing of it all, but culture is truly set at the ground, boots on the ground, Tim's on the concrete level. In a more polished way to say this, sociologists call this vernacular culture. And this basically describes how culture is really set by ordinary people, ordinary moments. It's not just museums, it's not just celebrities, it's not just these large archives, these institutions. They capture at a grand scale, market it, and also bottle it up and save it for time, but that's actually not where the cultural aspect starts. It starts at neighborhood restaurants like your local Chinese spot, family traditions like the yearly family reunion, beauty rituals like going to the beauty shop every 2 weeks to get your relaxer touched up, slang that's used that used to be very regional and very cultural that now gets disseminated on the internet so you can't really tell who and where it came from. Everyone's using the same slang, but you used to be able to know, oh, you're from Detroit because you say this. Oh, you're from New York because you say this. Oh, you're from Europe because you say this a certain way. You go on holiday, you don't just go on vacation. Local businesses in your community and community events, all of these things are actually where culture is set, reset, and most importantly, transmitted and inherited that we don't necessarily lean into as much anymore. Most culture doesn't live in museums, it lives in everyday lives. You can see this erasure basically get served to you on a literal platter when it comes to health, wellness, and like healthy foods, right? Healthy foods, I use that in large quotes because the lettuce ain't even good, the blueberries ain't good, the chips ain't good. I don't know what's going on right now. Help us, okay? Help us. But healthy foods and healthy lifestyle is a huge market on the internet, right? But rarely in that content do you ever see cultural foods. Cultural foods have almost been demonized and also decentered away from what is healthy. Mind you, most ethnic, racial, cultural groups all use fresh ingredients, spices that are innately healthy, more rooted in tradition, more rooted in what naturally comes from the earth, rather than these health foods that have spawned and popped up. However, you rarely see on any of your healthy food pages, your protein packed meals, something that reflects a cultural staple. And speaking of recipe books, I think one of the most meaningful ways to keep the recipes literally, is by creating recipe journals. Document things, and not just document them digitally, write it down and do it. Something I absolutely love is the concept of recipe journaling. You don't just buy a recipe book, save a couple of, recipes on your TikTok, look on Pinterest for healthy foods to meal prep for the week. What you do is you actually keep your own recipe journal where you write down different recipes that you love, enjoy, and you've actually made. You write down what you liked about it. What was the moment that you enjoyed with this meal? Who it reminds you of? Who it came from? This is also a game you see sometimes at baby showers or wedding showers or bridal showers, all the showers, where people write down recipes onto recipe cards and give it to a person. It's because you're physically passing down different pieces, bits and pieces of our culture, of our ethnicity, of our nationality, all of the things that make us us and that we eat and that we love. Food is like, what they say, like the key to the heart. So if I put you on game to a good recipe, like I have a jerk chicken pot pie bussin', if you know, you know, because that is a recipe that I reluctantly give out to my family and friends, because every time they have the wow, we got to write this one down. So start keeping a recipe journal so that you can write down recipes and the moments that happened with them. And this is a great idea for you to reach out to your family, reach out to grandma, reach out to grandpa, reach out to your cousin, uncle, daddy fish, the unk on the grill, and be like, yo, what is the recipe? And you can't do too much. You got to be quiet on the creek. This is so beautiful, not because I think, everything's just going to disappear overnight, but you have to be careful of the slow drip, because I truly believe every generation has something to carry forward. You already know we have a digital archival. We've saved so many recipes literally and have not made any of them. Where is the practice of actually making the recipes that we said we're going to make? But here's where the internet makes it just a little bit complicated, un poquito. We've never had more access to culture. Korean skincare, Japanese stationery, matcha, Scandinavian minimalism design, African aesthetics, vintage Americana. The list literally goes on. And I think it's absolutely beautiful. The inspiration is endless. I'm inspired. I'm fired up. I see all this wonderful, beautiful culture that's around me. I'm like, okay, great. I think the important nuance is that you can't always be anti-trend. And I'm not anti-trend. Here on the Mac Edit, we just talk about it. We just put it out there with the nuance, the history, and the context. Because those trends serve a purpose. Because there's a difference between just consuming a lot of culture and actually contributing to it. Again, a lot of people have a lot of things to say, but they're not contributing to the culture. You yourself are so worried about someone else's cultural identity online, yet you fail to even maintain in your own life the proper rituals and roots of different cultural, ethnic, and national, recipes. Literally. Now, there's a very famous sociologist called Pierre Bourdieu who sums this up quite geniusly in a philosophy called cultural capital. We talk a lot about social currency, but cultural capital is like the cultural cousin to social currency, right? It's education, intellect, speech patterns, taste, jokes, food, vocabulary, manners. It's somewhere between objectified cultural capital, like physical things you can hold, but also the intangible things that we just understand. We get it. If you know, it just resonates. And that is why Saucy Santana's song, Quiet on the Creek, has really blown up. And if you haven't yet heard it, go check it out, because you got to be quiet on the creek. That also explains why when a writer on Complex went to go explain to the masses what Quiet on the Creek means, it's almost like a violation of that cultural capital. It's like, if you know, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. Eventually you might catch on, but it's because there's cultural boundaries around the things that we share, that we inherit, that we understand. So really getting the references of where something came from, why it matters, who created it, and how to participate in it respectfully, not just objectifying it. So again, the internet has made us incredible consumers of culture, but how are we preserving it, maintaining it, and contributing to it? And this is where that cultural literacy gap comes in, because just because you consume a lot of culture online, you consume it on your TV shows, your movies, on your reels, on Facebook, and all the things, does not mean that you are actively maintaining and preserving culture in your own life. And I think we need to get back to it. Bringing back substance, depth, and character to why we love, share, and buy products. You already know the deal. As someone who I need this mic taken away from me. As someone who loves all things beauty, wellness, thrift, and vintage fashion, but most importantly, heavy on the culturally rich experiences, I was craving like crispy edge pancakes on a Saturday morning type of craving. Something that felt like the cross between a Substack article and a traditional YouTube video. So I created it. Welcome back to the Mac Edit. My name is M.A.C. And we can't be on the Mac Edit, of course, without talking about more of the products, the things that are going to help us preserve this culture. Then what better place to start with books? I'll rapid fire hit you with some of my faves, some recent, some old reads, some books that I feel really capture a moment of time, a cultural snapshot. Now, they don't even necessarily have to be realistic books. They can very much be science fiction books. They can very much be nonfiction books. Sometimes nonfiction captures reality a little bit better than reality itself. But I think there's a gamut of both. That's why you have books like Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin, absolute classic written in the 50s, a very coming of age, moral and spiritual struggle story about James Baldwin himself, and literally tells the time of what it was like to be in a very racially divided, segregated country in the 1950s. And then on the other hand, I've read books or essays like this. This is by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's The Language of the Night, and this is a collection of her essays, writings, science fiction, and fantasy. And quite literally, this book is so groundbreaking for me because it talks about the importance of science fiction. One of my favorite quotes from this book is, "We like to think we live in daylight, but half of the world is always dark, and fantasy, like poetry, speaks the language of the night." All of that to say, there is an innate language that we all speak. We transmit it. We're having a conversation right now through this screen, but there's also an unspoken language that our fantasies, that our mind, that our creativity needs to be fed and spoken to, and that can be through reading, through science fiction. And again, this captures a snapshot in time and captures the cultural importance of science fiction and reading. The book also argues and refutes the fact that mainstream media, mainstream publication often tries to decenter, remove science fiction as a credible source of literacy, but that couldn't be more opposite of the truth. Then I have some of my favorite books on the other hand, which are a little bit more directly autobiographical, literally about the lives of the people who wrote them. The Viola Davis book, that is Finding Me. Woo, that one was quite a bit close to home, so it is hard to get through. If you are sensitive to material of abuse and different topics under that light, tread lightly with this one. However, it is very eye-opening. Then we have the book Black Cake, which tells a story about family secrets and how they always really do come to a head. And yet again, also something that hits way close to home. So I share those books to say, not that you have to go out and write a book, an autobiography, or that you have to read an autobiography, but you should stay in tune with literature and culture that not only captures and reflects time, but captures and reflects culture so that you can pass it along. You can talk about it. You can have conversations about it. One of my favorite areas, niches, if you will, is beauty. And this is one of the areas that benefits from, I would say, trends and aesthetics the most. Now, these aren't inherently bad, but again, you have to have a discerning lens. I'm telling you, that discerning lens will save you a lot to realize when sometimes these beauty trends and aesthetics are helpful and they're harmful. Let's talk about them in the helpful light for once. I promise, because I promise I'm not a hater. Because sometimes, guilty as charged, we can sometimes border villainizing aesthetics, like they're just shallow and like they don't have any meaning, which is not true. Aesthetics often have memory. Think about henna tattoos, indigenous face painting, braids and protective natural styles, regional aesthetics, gold jewelry. And while sometimes these aesthetics can be co-opted by the internet and just taken and run with, they actually originate from really, really beautiful places. And that is the key piece of why we need to make sure we keep these recipes, because if the aesthetic or the trend gets so far from the original cultural reference, the context gets lost, boo. The internet sometimes collapses the space between races, ethnicities, culture, and makes it into a monolith. It makes it seem like, for example here, all Black women should be in this same vein. We should all be about the same things and all strive towards the same things. However, I feel like the erasure of culture doesn't allow for there to be this nuance, doesn't allow for there to be this duality, this complexity to our identity. This applies to almost any and everybody that I can think of, because we aren't all the same. We didn't all have the same upbringings. We didn't all have the same experiences and don't all have the same goals. It allows there to be hopefully a respectful discourse around the fact that not every culture, not every everything is a monolith. We have to protect and preserve those different things. Do want to be able to leave space for people of different backgrounds that may happen to look like each other, express themselves and express their culture, because it's not necessarily identical to your own. So Asian culture isn't one aesthetic, Black culture isn't one aesthetic, European culture isn't one aesthetic, and the list goes on and on and on and on. African culture isn't one aesthetic. Just because your best friend is Nigerian doesn't mean that it's the same culture as someone who's from Ghana. Like, we have to stop collapsing the space on the internet of cultures and protect these things, okay? Any culture is shaped by experiences, geography, history, classism, community. This is so represented in our beauty. Beauty is not just how we look, it's also how we remember. It's also how we reflect out into the world, the experiences, the place that we come from, and the things that we've done. Speaking of beauty, I love everyday products that make beauty feel so intentional. And when I think about beauty, I think about just the early days, just being a little girl, getting my hair done, which was, it felt like at the time, an excruciating life or death experience as a little Black girl getting my hair combed out. That is why my favorite brush now is called the Unbrush It. Unbrush It. This, if I would have had this, we're just going to ignore the hair that's in here. If I would have had this brush when I was a little girl, sitting like on the floor between my mom's legs, getting my hair brushed out, there would be no tears. If you have thick curly hair, you need to get an Unbrush It. I promise you, it will change your life. It will change your wash day routine. It will change your whole experience. I think we need to slow down and do our hair again. Slow down, take our time, and spend time with our hair. Just like we spend time doing our skincare, slowing down to do our makeup. Stop trying to rush through doing our hair. Get the proper tools and utensils that are going to make it an enjoyable experience. This Unbrush It changed the game. And then probably one of my top 5 brands for hair care products for myself is Pattern Beauty. Okay, Miss Tracy Ellis Ross. At first, of course, any celebrity brand, it's a little bit weary because you're like, girl, are we just doing this as a grift or what's up? But if you like your products creamy,
pause, we'll start there.
If your hair responds really well to that, you like your products to feel like they're moisturizing, they're on there, they're doing the thing. I feel like Pattern does such a good job of that. I need a decent amount of product in my hair, okay? Period. The light stuff, the little mousse, okay, it's not gonna hit. It's not gonna do what it needs to do. I need something that's a little bit more dense. This is the curl gel. Now, this is awesome because it doesn't necessarily have a white cast. When you first put it on, you may see a little white, but it doesn't dry down with a white cast. But it is a light enough gel where you don't have a hard eco styler gel type of cast, but it's more friendly for your curls rather than like slick back situation or just a quick wash and go, which it never really is a wash and go. You don't really wash and go. You do your hair for like 2 hours and then go. That's what this product is for. And then also, I love the styling cream. If I'm ever doing like braid down, braid out, twist out, any kind of styling, this cream, it's so thick, she's so dense. This is a fresh jar. Yeah. Absolutely love Pattern Beauty hair products. That's a product I'll spend my hard-earned coin on to feel intentional, to feel like I'm doing my hair, to feel luxurious. And it really connects me back to those times when I used to dread doing my hair because it felt like I didn't have the proper tools and products that was really working for it. But from me to you, go get you an Unbrush It and go get you some Pattern. As we see through our beauty products, through our books, through our videos, culture is being preserved. The culture is there. I don't think the internet is absolutely destroying culture. Unpopular opinion. I think it is just genuinely flattened culture. Everything exists beside everything. Everything exists in context next to each other. So like, for example, you open up your phone to do your little scroll, flip from one video that could be talking about centuries old traditions, things that have historical context, reference, in-depth, and then you do one more scroll and you can have a trend that was just created yesterday, a little dance, a little recipe, a little something. And those two things exist right next to each other, and you don't have time to really process one or the other for that matter, or really the depth or context between either of the two, all on the same feed. So the challenge persists that it isn't access that's our issue, it's context. Not only do you see this when you're flipping between your favorite beauty creators, you see this out in the wild in fashion. Fashion has always been about translation, not copying, Translation. Now, someone who you may or may not have heard before, don't worry, I'm going to educate you, is Dapper Dan. Okay, Dapper Dan, Dapper Down. He's a legendary, absolutely iconic tailor from Harlem, who is probably most known for something called logomania, slapping logos of luxury brands all over. He would screen print from brands like Louis Vuitton, Fendi, Chanel for his own custom work. Put it on tracksuits, put it on car interiors, you name it, okay? And this is why you started to see logomania come through and creep up into hip hop, into rap culture, and into street fashion. All of the street legends really know and pay homage to Dapper Dan because he set this movement ablaze. And now, fast forward to today, we see where even luxury brands have recognized dupe culture, if you will, or logomania culture, and have leaned into it in their own branding, in their own marketing, and now also do crossovers, collabs with streetwear brands to level set and to bring their luxury brand to different markets. Culture survives because it's practiced. It has to survive by doing. My hope deep down in my bones is that we become equal contributors to the culture. They don't just look back at the 2020s and, all the things, the Gen Zs, the millennials, the zillennials, and anyone, and they're like, hey, they have no culture. The recipes got lost and burned. We don't want it to die with us, and we also want to set our own. Every generation gets to decide what becomes a recipe and the things that live on. So whatever yours is, make sure that you keep it. And with that, I love you so much. Catch you on the next episode of the Mac Edit. Bye.